Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this first episode in the series, Test-Driven Development with Laravel 8. In this episode, we're going to clone the Laravel repository, push it into our own GitHub repository, and complete the process of setting up our local environment. By the end of this episode, we'll have a fresh instance of Laravel 8. So to begin, we're going to clone the Laravel repository. As you can see here in my browser, I'm at the GitHub homepage for Laravel. I'm going to click on code and copy the URL for HTTPS, return to my terminal. For this project, I want to work in a dedicated development folder on my desktop, so I'm going to make that now and CD into that development folder. Type git clone and paste the URL for the Laravel repository. And we want GitHub to clone this repository into a folder named dogparks. And once that's done cloning, I'll go ahead and resume the video. Okay, now that that's done cloning, I'm going to CD into dogparks. And first thing I see is we are on a 9.x branch of Laravel. If I run a git branch -a, we can see all the branches available for us. We can check out Laravel 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. For this project, we're using Laravel 8. So I'm going to press Q to quit out of this screen, and I will run a git checkout on 8.x. And that's great. Now we are automatically on the 8.x branch, and we're up to date with Laravel 8. So next thing we need to do is unassociate this code with the Laravel repository and push it into our own GitHub repository. So let's go back to GitHub, and I'm already signed in with my GitHub account. So I'm going to go to the home page. And once that home page loads for GitHub, click on create repository. Repository name will be dogparks. And description, I want description to be a Laravel 8 web application for dog parks that allows authenticated users to manage content. And this will be a private repository since we are making this for a client. And we are not going to initialize this repository with a README or a git ignore because Laravel 8 already comes out of the box with an excellent README file and a .git ignore file that is perfect for our code base. So let's create repository. Awesome. We've created our dogparks private repository, and we have some instructions from GitHub in order to get that set up with our code. The first command we want to use in the instructions from GitHub is git init, and this is going to create a .git folder for us that will assist us in setting up and configuring our GitHub repo. If we go back to our terminal and go back to our code, run an ls-al, we can see we already have a .git folder. We can see we're associated with the 8.x branch for Laravel repo. And if we do a git remote -v, we see we are set up with the URL for the Laravel repo for both pushing and fetching. So what I'm going to do is run an rm-rf on .git folder. And the flags R and F, R being recursive, F being force. So we're removing recursively and forcefully inside the .git directory, all files and directories. So let's do that. And first thing I notice is we're no longer associated with a GitHub branch. If I do an ls-al, we no longer have the .git folder. And if I do a git remote -v, we're no longer associated with a GitHub repo. This is perfect for where we want to be. So if you haven't done so already, copy git init from the GitHub repo instructions and paste it. And you can see now we're associated with a master branch. If we do an ls-al, we have a .git folder and we're ready to configure this. So let's go back to the instructions, and the next command is git add README file. Well, we don't want to just add a README file, so let's grab the git add and copy that. Go back to our terminal and paste it. We will do a git add all, a period for all. And I'm okay with running a git add all because Laravel 8 comes out of the box with a .gitignore file, which means we're only going to be adding the files we want to be tracking. So let's enter that and do a git status. And we'll see here we have all of our files that we're now tracking in green. Let's go back to our GitHub repo and commit those files that we're tracking now. We have for our next command, git commit -m first commit. The -m is a flag for message. And of course, the message being first commit. Let's paste this in our terminal and edit that commit message. Let's remove first commit and make it a little more specific for our project. In this case, I want to put initial Laravel 8 framework and enter. If we do a git log, we'll see we have a nice clean commit message for our first commit, initial Laravel 8 framework. I'm going to press Q to quit out of this screen. And we're in a good spot here. Let's go back to our GitHub repo. Copy the next command for git branch -m main. -m is a flag for renaming a branch. So we're going to rename the master branch to main. Enter. And now instead of being on the master branch, we're on the main branch, which is perfect. Let's go back to our terminal, or I'm sorry, our GitHub repo and copy the next command. Git remote add origin and the URL of our repository. This is what's going to connect our code with our repo. So let's paste that in and run a git remote -v. And you can see here, we are now connected to our GitHub repo for the origin for both pushing and fetching. Go back to the GitHub repo and copy the last command where we're going to push to our repository. Let's copy that and paste it in our terminal and press enter. Now we should be prompted for some credentials for GitHub, and we are. I'm going to go ahead and type in my username and password. We get an error. It says support for password authentication was removed August 13, 2021. Please use a personal access token instead. So for security, GitHub won't let you use your basic GitHub credentials to push to a branch. We need to use a personal access token. So let's set that up real quick. Go back to GitHub and click on your profile for GitHub and open in a new tab, the settings. Once that page loads, scroll down and click on developer settings. Personal access tokens, generate new token. We have a note here for temp access to dog parks, which I'll use. Expiration is 7 days. Select the scope of repo and workflow and generate token. And once that's generated, go ahead and copy the token, go back to your terminal and rerun the push command. Enter in your GitHub username and paste the token in for your password. We should now have pushed all of our code to our repository. So if we go back to our tab in GitHub for our repository and refresh, we now have all of our code for the initial Laravel 8 framework. This is a great start. Let's go back to the personal access token and delete that before we forget. I understand, delete, close the tab. Let's open up our code inside of a PHP storm or any IDE of your choice. Okay, we've loaded up our dog parks project inside a PHP storm. So if we take a look here at our files and directories, we can see that we have a composer.json file, but no composer.lock. So let's go back to the terminal and run a composer update. Once this is done running, I'll go ahead and resume the video. Okay, Composer update has finished running. And if I go back to my IDE, I'll see we have now a composer.lock file in red, which means it's not tracked and able to be tracked based on the git ignore file. And we have a vendor folder now with all of our packages that were called and loaded from composer.json in yellow, which means it's a new directory and we're not tracking it with the git ignore file is excluding it from being tracked. So if we run a git add all, vendor in yellow is going to be ignored and composer.lock will be added. So let's do a git status. And exactly, we can see composer.lock is queued to be added, but we don't see a vendor directory because it's in our git ignore file to be ignored. And let's check on that just to make sure. And it is. Okay, so let's run a git add composer.lock. Let's commit that file with a message of add initial composer.lock. And that's fine. Let's do a git log. And we can see we have another commit ready to be pushed. Add initial composer.lock file. Press Q to quit out of this screen. And let's go ahead and push this to our GitHub repo. Authentication failed. Let's try again. Sometimes it just doesn't connect to the GitHub repo. Enter in your credentials. And again, we hit that error where we need a personal access token. So let's go ahead and set that up. Open up settings in a new tab for GitHub, developer settings, personal access tokens, generate new token. Again, we'll use the same note as before, temp access to dog parks. The scopes will be repo and workflow, and generate token. Copy that token and let's push again. Type in your GitHub username and paste in the token for password. And that's a success. So if we go back to our GitHub repo and refresh, we should now see a composer.lock file that was pushed, and that's perfect. Okay, next thing we want to do is finish setting up our local environment. I already have Vagrant set up, so all I need to do is install the package of Homestead. So let me go to composer.json, and I have no Homestead package, so I'm going to go ahead and require that with Composer. Composer require Laravel Homestead. And once that's finished installing, I'll go ahead and resume the video. Okay, Homestead is finished installing. I'm going to run a git status, and it looks like we've updated the composer.json and composer.lock files. And of course we did because we just required a new Composer package. So if we go back to the PHP storm, we can see these are in blue, ready to be tracked. They're not new files, so they're not in red. They're just modified files, so they are in blue. Go back to the terminal and let's add those. Composer.json, composer.lock. Let's do a git status, and they're in green, so they're queued up to be committed. Run a git commit -m for message, and our commit message will be add Homestead package. Okay, and let's go ahead and push this. Go back to our personal access token and copy that because we're going to need it for our password. Looks like it already automatically pushed it. It probably has our token cached. So let's go back to our repository and refresh. And we can see the composer.json and composer.lock has been updated 24 seconds ago. That's perfect. So let's go back to PHP Storm and let's open up our actually, I'm going to go back to our terminal, and I need a homestead.yaml file in order to finish configuring Homestead. So I will run a PHP vendor bin homestead make command. Homestead is installed. So let's go back to our PHP storm, and we'll see we have a few new untracked files. They're in red, which means they are now able to be tracked. So let's go ahead and track those. Git status. Here are our 3 files. I'm going to go ahead and run a git add all to grab those 3 and stage them for committing. We can see they're now in green after running a git add all, which means they're ready to be committed. So I'm going to run a git commit -m for message. And our message is going to be auto generated files for Homestead. Enter. Do a git status. We no longer have any files to be staged for committing since we already committed them. If we run a git log, we have our 4th commit, auto generated files for Homestead. Press Q to quit out of the screen. And let's go ahead and run a git push. All right, perfect. Let's go back to our PHP storm and open up our homestead.yaml file. It's in yellow, which means we do not track this with GitHub. It's in gitignore as a file that we don't want to track. So first thing we want to do is in our homestead.yaml file is change our test URL for our site to dogparks.test. And we see here our database name for our local environment is going to be Homestead. And our IP address is going to be 192.168.5656. So copy that. Let's close this homestead.yaml file since we're finished configuring it. And we need to create a new .env file based on this .example file. So let's copy this and paste it. Name it just .env. Go back to homestead.yaml and recopy this IP address and close it. First thing I notice in this .env file is we're missing an app key. So let's go back to our terminal and generate that. So we're going to run a PHP artisan key generate. It says here application key set successfully. Let's go back to our PHP storm and here's the key. That's perfect. Let's go down and for DB host, we're going to paste in the Homestead IP. For DB database name, we're going to put Homestead. For database username, we'll put Homestead. And for the password, it'll be secret. Let's save this and close the .env file. Go back to our terminal and run a git status. We have a new file of homestead.yaml and new file of .env, but we don't track those. These are just for our local environment. So what do we do next? We run a Vagrant up. And once this is done running, I'll go ahead and resume the video. Okay, Vagrant has finished provisioning based on the homestead.yaml configuration. To make sure everything is set up okay, let's visit our website, our local instance of our Laravel 8 project. And I'm going to type in dogparks.test. And here it is. We have a fresh Laravel 8 instance ready to work on and start creating some tests for. So thank you for watching this video, and please join me in the next one if you want to get started with me on creating some test functions.